Welcome to Espresso with Matt. I am here. I am thrilled to be with a very old friend, Jakai Braithwaite, Captain Jakai Braithwaite, excuse me,
Yeah.
um, who I've known for, Jakai, how many years? Maybe 35 years. Been a while.
I mean, it's probably would say, yeah. I mean, yeah, 35, 40 years. Yeah, yeah, probably.
So we're thrilled to be talking today. Over a cup of coffee virtually. Um, Jakai, can you just give a little introduction about yourself, what you do, your
Sure.
role currently?
Sure. So first of all, I do want to just be transparent, right? Because I think that probably, Matt, you're going to be talking about a lot of things about leadership. And one of the things that you'll hear come out of my mouth is transparency, honesty, and trust, and all these things. So let me tell you, I will say this, that I don't fancy coffee, actually, although I'm a Jersey boy. The last time I had a cup of coffee, it was in undergrad studying for finals. But every day, religiously, every day, I'm green tea all day. And I'm
Okay.
almost to the point where I probably can't even get my day started without my green tea. So I'm green tea, if that's okay with you, that we
Uh,
basically
we
chat
we
up.
are we are agnostic about beverage choice here on Espresso with Matt. So I have here a double espresso, heavily caffeinated, and because it's Halloween, I have dipped into the Halloween bag already, and I got the peanut butter cup right here.
I will say this, that it is an absolute honor to be here, talking to you. You said it to your guests that you and I go way back. And I think it's an understatement what you said, because you didn't give them the context of how deep that is. And I think it's important for people to know that, when we talk about, we grew up, in a small little borough in New Jersey, and how close the community was, and almost every family knew every family. And then for you and I growing up playing sports together, football and wrestling, and the bonds that are formed from just that alone, not just being friends riding bikes up and down the street, but the bonds that are formed from playing on a football field on a gridiron, or wrestling on a wrestling mats. That's a bond that's so unique, I think. And I think that I would love to have the opportunity just to highlight that to your guests, so that they understand really how significant and close that we are. So again, I will say it is an honor, and thank you for having me here.
And it's funny because we wrestled together in high school, and we were a very competitive team. And before our practice in wrestling, our one of our coach made us run, I think about 2.5 miles.
Yeah.
And me being the heavyweight, and I think Chikai was probably at 140 or something like that, which is probably close to. We take off at the same time, and somehow Jakai would get to the practice about a half hour ahead of me. So I wasn't designed for running, but I gotta tell you, that sport, wrestling, for me, taught me so much about life, and it's lessons I learned, and I'm sure serve you well. How you got into your role there?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you, a Jersey boy, knew always that I had a love for public safety. I knew I wanted to be on the job. Father was a federal agent, and I guess as a child, I knew I was gonna wanted to emulate my father a little bit. But then I would say through education, life experiences, that my personality, just attracted me, to the field. So right out of undergrad, out of West Virginia, about a year after, I came down here to Atlanta. I wanted to pursue a graduate degree, as well as obtain a position working for a local municipality law enforcement agency. Now, I'm a Jersey boy. I didn't know anything about Atlanta. I knew
Yeah.
Atlanta from the '96 Olympics when I was here. So I thought that I would just be coming to Atlanta, right? Just to go apply to Atlanta Police Department. I had an uncle who was a professor at Emory University. So I came, stayed with him while I looked. Well, fortunately, there was also a group of girls who lived in this state who I had studied abroad with in Spain. And one of them shared that, hey, my father's actually a captain at Alpharetta. So I was like, well, what the heck is an Alpharetta? Had no idea. It was another little small suburb of Atlanta.
Yeah.
So came up here and met with her father. And he said, hey, man, actually, we're hosting our test next week. And he goes, we'd love to have you. Now, again, I'm a 24-year-old kid, fresh out a year out of school. I didn't have, two nickels to rub together. So I was like, I can't afford to get a flight back out here. However, where there's a will, there's a way. And Matt, you'll remember one of our other close friends we grew up with, Brian Covert. Uh,
Yep.
he actually was just hanging out with me on this trip because he wanted to come, mess around and flirt with the ladies, right? So he was just here for the girls. And so he heard all of this. So he's like, hey, I'll actually go out there with you and sit for the exam, take the test, which we did. And at that time, much different than what you see today. There were two positions open for a police officer, and that's when you have 300 people, like similar to how it was in Jersey back then,
Yeah.
competing for one job. Now it's like if I get three people to show up for a test, today, I mean, obviously the game has changed.
Yeah.
So after went through the process, came down here a few times, but after sitting for the interview, there was a captain. I'm sorry, he was a lieutenant at the time. He ended up becoming the captain, actually the first black captain in Alpharetta since 1958.
Wow.
And he pulled me aside afterwards, and he was really impressed with the interview. And he said, "Hey, I think it's important that I snatch you up before someone in Jersey does." And he did just that. So here I was, and I thought I would be here, Matt, for 2, maybe 4 to 5 years at the most, and then I was going to move on to the federal level,
I
which that
mean,
was,
it's hilarious how life works sometimes. And here you are,
yeah,
meeting some friends, go from there, connections. And I gotta tell you, things in life work out a funny way, and connections always come back, and you making connections. And you've had a unique talent since I've known you to make deep connections with people, friendships, leadership positions. You have that ability, and so you definitely have used your connections in such great. It's always funny how connections lead to something great there, and it
you,
has. I mean, you've been there your whole career now.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, and of course, like I said, I didn't plan to do that, and it's so funny that you say that because that's true, right? I was, blessed with that, with the ability, obviously, to form relationships and close bonds. Like obviously, the relationship I have with you, but then even some of the deeper ones when you start talking about your Anthony Bunnycans, your Jamie Muscajuris. I mean, your Brian Coverts, who obviously we're 5 days apart. We've been together since we were 7 months old, and Jamie six. So all of some of these relationships, I'm talking 47 years, 48 years, right? It's crazy. We have that, but it's unique that I didn't recognize that. Like I didn't understand how that could benefit me in life later on. I didn't understand how important that is. But now, as you know, Matt, right, as an executive, as a leader, you now see the power of like networking, and it's
yeah.
like you think about, and not to take away from anybody who's in positions, but really, if you start to think about it, like people, you're going to get a position because of a relationship. Two, if two, a blessing because you're lucky, right? And or three, raw talent, or a combination of all three. But to your point, building relationships, especially in business, it's so important. It's so important.
I mean, Jakai, well, first of all, two things. One, I went out to lunch with Jamie Muscajuri a few months ago, and one of his feedback, he goes, Matt, why do you fit LinkedIn so much? So he's going to lose his mind when he sees this
Oh
about
wow.
the. So I'm looking forward to that. But the second thing you talked about right there is, the power of networking, connecting with others. I mean, it's so important, and I love what I've seen you do on social media in your role, and you've
Right.
connected with people.
Have been fortunate that I'm probably I am the only commanding officer in this outfit who has supervised in every division within our organization. And my current role is called the Organizational Services Division. So speaking to someone in corporate America like you, Matt, or someone else in the public sector would understand it as the Office of the Chief. My initiative with hiring and recruiting, which I'm no longer in that area. But what I can say, and I'm proud of it, is I actually came up with this initiative of national recruiting. And in law enforcement, that's not necessarily a new thing.
Yeah.
Okay. But the way I did it was because what we did was we basically said that we understood that agencies would go from Georgia to Jersey or to New York or to wherever, and they'd say, "Hey, guess what? Our agency is so great. Here's an application. Here, they might be there in Times Square and say, "Hey, here's an application. Fill this out. Blah blah blah. I got it all for you." But at the end of the day, you still have to come to Georgia and go through our process, right? And sometimes it could take 2 and 3, 4 trips to go through that process, like I did when I did it 25 years ago, right? So what I said was, I said, "Chief, you know what? Why don't we take our show on the road?" I said, "We need to try to compete with corporate America because Matt, as an HR director, if you were going to sit for an interview here in Georgia, what would we do? Some company here in Georgia is going to fly you out here to Atlanta. They're going to send a car service to Hartsfield International Airport. They're going to bring you to your hotel. When it's time for your interview, the car service is going to pick you up at the hotel. They're going to drive you right here. All of these different things, right? Corporate America do that, but in government, we just can't do that." So I said, "So Chief, why don't we load up our physical agility test in the back of this trailer?" That's like, "We're going to drive it to Jersey." And again, what did you say before, Matt Palazzolo? Relationships. Because
Yeah.
of the relationship with a brother named Michael Sickles, who's a
Yeah. Oh
principal,
my God. Yeah.
who's a principal at Hasbrook Heights, right? As well as sits on council in Hasbrook Heights. He said, "Hey, wait a minute, host it here. And on top of that, we will give you the gym the entire week on the arm." Now, Jersey, New
Yeah.
York, you're not getting anything free, right? So because of relationships, right? Before we would always you'd have to fly out here to Alpharetta, Georgia to go see our medical facility to have your medical screening. And
Yeah.
guess what the name of that company is? Concentra Healthcare. Guess who one of our friends who happens to be the vice president for Concentra Healthcare, an individual by the name of Giovanni Galera, right? Who actually happens to be one of my great friends, right? So a phone call just like this, he said, "Wait a minute, no problem." He said, "Concentra in Jersey, New York, they're like liquor stores. They're on every corner." He's
Yeah.
like, "We'll set it up for you so you can have your candidates. So now they can go ahead and they can go to any one of those markets in Jersey, in the tri-state area. They don't have to come out here." So we basically were able to sell this whole package to the brothers and sisters in New Jersey and New York and the tri-state and say, "Hey, listen, you can go through this whole process without even leaving."
You know, as a leader, what are some of the things that you bring to the table as a leader? What makes you unique as a leader, Jakai?
Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna tell you, and I know you probably have some questions for me too, later on regarding that. For me, it's just I think trust, right? And when you talk about trust, trust is builds character. And I think just being my true authentic self, and you we said it 100 times, Matthew Palazzolo, we're talking about building relationships, right? And I think the fact that I think I have ability to build relationships. When you do that here in the workforce, it allows doors to open. And if by building relationships, you build that trust, so people are willing to follow you. People you're able to influence people. So I think that is probably the number one quality I think that I possess that has helped me to be successful, throughout my tenure here on the job.
Absolutely, and that's have known you for all these years. That's a skill you've had. One of my passions I talk about all the time, and I worked in the field for 26 years, is behavior health, mental health, and wellness. And there's so much in the news over the last few years about police officers, public service, managing that, dealing with that. Um, your officers, the people you work with are out there doing amazing things, but it's a tough environment right now, very tough environment. How do you maintain how do you know they're okay? What do you do to make sure they're okay?
So I'm going to try to answer that question for you, Matt, but I'm going to tell you this. I'm not sure if you were prepared what you were asking me, because yes, we go way back, but there are some things about me that you don't know, and I'm going to share that with you here. So since the past 3 years, I have been an advocate for mental health and wellness in law enforcement. Matter of fact, I was just in the FBI National Academy, and I had personally my own challenge coins made with has actually our shield on it, but on the back, and I'm going to send you one that it actually says wellness, self-care, resilience, and then it says mental health matters, right? And I hand these out. With the stress, there's something which you know of, it's called vicarious trauma of the job. From being a seasoned detective for all of these years, all of the things that I saw as an investigator, combined with what I saw as a police officer, because what you know, Matt, is your average Joe or Jane, right, will see two critical incidents in their lifetime. Okay, so that means, Matt, when you were a Colgate, you might have saw a drunk frat boy fall off of a second floor balcony and maybe got injured or maybe died. You saw that. Or
I can't say I saw that.
right. Or when you're driving down 80,
Yeah,
15 years later, you see a motorcycle, two motorcycles racing, acting silly, and then a quarter mile up the street, you see one of those bikes on the ground, body
yeah.
part all over. Two critical incidents that you'll see in your lifetime. They say law enforcement officers in a 20, 25-year career, we see over 600. Okay,
Yes.
but then you add somebody, like me who has that specialty as an investigator, my wheelhouse. Also my whole career was working the homicides, the suicides, the child molestation, all of these different things. That's vicarious trauma of the job. It all came to a head. So for me, I was in a really, really dark place. Although I was still working out, but I wasn't necessarily healthy. And I knew that my screwed up mind um, definitely couldn't support my body. So overnight, I became a vegetarian because I wanted to reset and get my body right so that my body could be strong to at least to control the screwed up head. Then the next thing I did, Matthew, was I was able to say, and I'm glad, is I was able to look myself in the mirror and say, I'm not all right. And I learned that it's okay to say that you're not okay. And again, I come from a family of this, right? My mother's a director at a psychiatric hospital, Greystone. So I was able to go to and say, hey, I need to speak to a therapist, and I did. And and I love it because what she calls is mental health talk, right? Which you're familiar with it, but I like how she framed it. This is just our mental health talk. And, she introduced me to something called, self-care. So went down that journey. I reconnected with my faith. I started journaling and doing all these other self-care things and meditation and doing my daily devotions and all of this other stuff. And, basically got myself together to go through this. Now, fortunate we never had to go through court and divorce, but it opened my eyes to something, and it got me to start reading and paying attention to this wellness and mental health. And the crazy thing about this, Matt, is during the last 3 years, I started talking to officers in his own agency and in the metropolitan area who would have these conversations. And I learned that, hey, when I was going through that, I wasn't in the class by myself. But the other thing, Matt, that scared me is that I had officers looking me in the mouth, telling me that they made out with their Glock. One actually even told me that he pulled the trigger, but it didn't go off. So this stuff is real, right? So over the last year, I've been working and trying to develop a program here, in our agency so that we can a wellness program. And then my ultimate goal is to actually take it, on the road and start selling this and teaching this to other law enforcement agencies throughout the country.
Well, Jakai, first of all, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that and putting that out there. And the most important thing in behavioral health, mental health is managing the stigma that's associated with it. And you know, encourage and leaders like yourself speaking truth to that and out there. I mean, opens up a whole thing. And I got to tell you, 26 years in behavioral health care, working as a leader there, direct care staff members there, the stigma associated with that, especially in positions like law enforcement, is so important. And I got to tell you, you speaking that, talking about that wellness with your team members, who goes a long way. And there's such a partner and network out there of individuals working on those issues. And I think it's so important you bring that forward and
Right.
talk about that.
Right.
Um, we are moving right to our espresso discussion real quick,
Get it. Let's
moving
get
right there to talking about, some tips here from there. So first of all, what's the best piece of advice you ever got over a cup of coffee?
Matt, and I know I'm long-winded, so I'm gonna try to, understand what brevity is. I'm gonna tell you, I don't even know if you can even see it on my wall, but okay,
Let me see. Yep.
see that picture? See that picture there of my
Oh, I
dad?
know that guy. Yep.
So that's my dad, right? And on that picture I have, and this I'm going somewhere with it. It says, if you tell the truth, you will always tell the same story. So over 20 years ago, he told me that. And I'm going to tell you where I'm going with this. I'm going somewhere with this,
Yeah.
right? The reason he told me that, okay, and this is a Vietnam vet, he got drafted to Vietnam. He told me that when I was going through my first internal affairs investigation. And I was a young cop, nervous. And I was only the witness, but I was still nervous that I had to go through this. And he shared that with me. But what I got out of that, right? And I didn't realize 20 years ago how important it was. But again, that same word that I had said to you before, I was talking to you, about telling the truth is also about trust, credibility, integrity. All of these things, align with things with leaders, right? As far as even decision making, people if they believe and they trust in you, and you were able to influence them, they're willing to follow you. The level of emotional intelligence, all of those things, all, in my opinion, are predicated around, trust, honestly, all of that stuff. So that is probably something that I got from my pops years ago. Didn't even realize how valuable it was, but
Yep.
it's something I use every day.
Well, I gotta tell you, first of all, your dad. I always loved your dad. Your dad was, no nonsense. Told you what he meant when he meant it. And that idea. I remember I worked with a counselor years ago who worked at me with Kara Klinka, and she was a substance abuse counselor, and she'd say nothing works like the truth.
Right,
And
exactly.
and I gotta tell you that's something there, and it's you kind of come that full circle moment. All those things you learned, all those connections you
Right.
heard. At some point, they kind of like little seeds that grow, and
Mhm.
you're like, you know what, Dad was right.
Right.
Jakai, I gotta tell you, you went through such great things here for leaders. Great examples about being connections, talking about trust, talking about transparency. I will say this. I really do mean this. I've been incredibly blessed to have you in my life, as a friend, as someone I look up to, as someone who's accomplished things. Your department is well served to have you in a leadership position.
Oh, God bless you.
Your transparency, your trust, your connection with others comes through. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. There's such great advice here. You have a wonderful life. And Jakai, thank you so much for joining us on Espresso with Matt. A lot of great nuggets here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the words, man. Matt, I love you, my brother. Thank you for having me here. Send my love to the family. And anytime you want to sit down and have another cup of tea and
We'll,
talk
we'll, we'll,
about
we'll we'll talk about the tea versus coffee discussion at the time.